Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale. The headlines. International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi says fighting near Ukraine's nuclear power plant must stop. Western countries pledge $1.55 billion in military aid to Ukraine. And the biggest ship carrying Ukrainian grain so far reaches Turkey. We begin this morning with updates of the Russian Ministry of Defense saying Russian military forces conducted assaults on multiple Ukrainian military targets. The Defense Ministry spokesperson, Igor Konashenkov, says the Russian forces attacked Ukraine's multiple rocket launchers and howitzers and struck the 14th and 66th Mechanized Brigades of Ukrainian military forces in Atomovsk and Adlyevska. In addition, Russian aerospace forces fighter aircraft say they have shot down one M124 helicopter near Nikopol in the Proteprovics region and some unmanned aerial vehicles in the Kharkov region. The Ukrainian side, however, says the Russian forces are trying to break through the defense line and capture a good position in the Donetsk region and restart attacks on Kramatorsk and Atomovsk. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an unusual evening address, spoke on the situation around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He said there had been new strikes in the area and, referring to Russia, called it one of the greatest crimes of that terrorist state. The plant was captured by Russian forces in the opening stages of the war following the invasion on February the 24th, and new strikes in close proximity of the plant have also been recorded. In his address, Mr. Zelensky also told government officials to stop talking to reporters about Kiev's military tactics against Russia, saying such remarks were frankly irresponsible.
What is going on now around Zaporizhzhia NPP is one of the greatest crimes of the terrorist state. Today, new strikes in close proximity to the NPP objects have been recorded. Russia has again hit the bottom in the world history of terrorism. No one else has used a nuclear power plant so obviously to threaten the whole world and set some conditions. And absolutely everyone in the world must react immediately to kick the occupiers out of Zaporizhzhia NPP. It is a global interest rather than just Ukrainian need. We are emphasizing on this at all levels, from the UN Security Council to contacts between states. Only the complete withdrawal of Russians from the territory of the NPP and the restoration of full control of Ukraine over the situation around the plant guarantee the restoration of nuclear security for the whole of Europe.
Meanwhile, the United Nations chief Antonio Guterres has called for military activity around that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to end as Moscow and Kiev blame each other for renewed shelling and the UN Security Council meets to discuss the situation. Russia seized Europe's largest nuclear power plant in March. The plant is still run by its Ukrainian technicians, though. Ukraine's Energoatom said the area was struck 5 times yesterday, including near the site where radioactive materials are stored. Mr. Guterres urged the withdrawal of military personnel and equipment and for no more forces or equipment to be deployed. He asked for Russia and Ukraine not to target the facilities or surrounding areas. IAEA chief Rafael Grossi briefed the 15-member council at the request of Russia. Mr. Grossi said that he was ready to lead an IAEA mission to Zaporizhzhia and called on Russia and Ukraine to cooperate so the inspectors could travel as soon as possible.
The IAEA has been ready to perform such a mission since June, when we were ready to go. But unfortunately, due to political factors and other considerations, it was not possible. We've seen what has happened over the past 2 months. We cannot allow such factors to delay us any longer. I reiterate that the military actions that have even the smallest potential to jeopardize nuclear safety or nuclear security at such a nuclear installation must stop immediately. These actions could lead us to serious consequences. The IAEA is ready to help avert such an escalation of the crisis. This is a serious hour, great hour, and the IAEA must be allowed to conduct its mission to Zaporizhzhia as soon as possible.
The United States reiterates the importance of facilitating access for IAEA personnel to address nuclear safety, security, and safeguards concerns at the Zaporizhzhia facility, as well as at other nuclear facilities around the country, in a manner that respects Ukrainian sovereignty. This visit cannot wait any longer. We once again call on Russia to cease all military operations at or near Ukraine's nuclear facilities and insist that Russia immediately return full control of the Zaporizhzhia facility to Ukraine. We are also aware of claims of mistreatment of the power plant's Ukrainian staff by Russian soldiers and note that, if true, such treatment would be inconsistent with the IAEA's 7 pillars of nuclear safety and security, which Russia has endorsed.
In other developments, the Danish Defense Minister Morten Bødskov says Western countries have committed more than 1.5 billion euros in cash, equipment and training to boost Ukraine's military capabilities in its war against Russia. The money, which was pledged by a group of 26 countries at a conference in Copenhagen, will be used to supply existing weapons, missiles and ammunition, increase weapons production for Ukraine, train Ukrainian soldiers and demine war-torn areas of the country.
Billion euros today, 26 countries as well as the European Union have met here in Copenhagen and have sent a clear signal. Ukraine's fight is our fight. We stand together and we stand with Ukraine. We condemn Russia's brutal attack in the strongest possible way, and we will continue to assist Ukraine in its military needs. In total, participants today have committed more than 1.5 billion euros to the table for Ukraine.
I am satisfied with the conference and with the results. A lot of information is classified, so I cannot discuss it openly, but we reached clear initiatives and commitments on demining. We agreed upon long-term and mid-term activity. These terms are also related to armaments production, and I am glad that we all have common sense that there is no time for fatigue. That is marathon. For marathon, you need energy, and frankly speaking, the main energy in this case is money. Our partners know that we need funding, and they articulated readiness to support us financially.
But it is also the case that Russia are starting to fail in many areas. They have failed so far and are unlikely to ever succeed in occupying Ukraine. Their invasion has faltered and constantly been remodified to the extent they are really only focusing in parts of the south and in the east, a long, long way away from their 3-day so-called special operation. 3 days are now over 150 days and nearly 6 months in.
Yes, actually for all of you.
More on Ukraine grain exports. We're learning that the Ocean Lion, the biggest ship to depart Ukraine so far, is at anchor in the Sea of Marmara near the southern end of Istanbul's Bosphorus Straits. According to the Turkish Defense Ministry, the ship left Ukraine on Tuesday and is set to deliver 64,720 metric tons of corn to South Korea. The deal brokered by the United Nations and Turkey between Russia and Ukraine has allowed 12 ships to depart from Ukraine's Black Sea ports since August the 1st. And unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States and the Western countries against Russia will not bring peace, but will only isolate themselves. And the short-sighted policy will also expose the European countries to very severe challenges So says co-founder of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research in Lund, Sweden, Jan Oberg. Mr. Oberg says the European countries are paying a heavy price, such as price hikes and social turmoil, by imposing sanctions on Russia, and these sufferings are brought by the US-led NATO rather than Russia.
Now, we're going to suffer terribly this winter in Europe because of the West's response. The response enormously much in terms of social riots, in terms of by NATO, led by the US. You know, we got to change our way of thinking about peace, because military security never leads to peace. It is only reconciliation, forgiveness, conflict analysis, and civilian talks and negotiations that can lead to peace.
While efforts are being made to get Ukrainian and Russian officials back to the negotiating table for peace talks, Russia has ruled out any attempts by Switzerland. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that Switzerland could not represent Ukrainian interests in Russian and Moscow's interests in Ukraine because it is no longer a neutral country. Ivan Mnechiev, the Foreign Ministry representative, told reporters Switzerland, unfortunately, has lost its status of neutral country and can be either a mediator nor a representative of our interests. It is known that Bern joined illegal Western sanctions against Russia. It supports anti-national Nazi regimes in Kiev, participates in aggressive Russia-phobic campaigns organized by the West and Ukraine. It is absolutely unclear how Bern can offer to be a mediator, a representative, or other kind with this type of attitude. Let's take a look at other developments. Russian military strikes on Ukrainian cities have increased in recent weeks. Here's what we know about them this week.
Pro-Russian separatists have accused the Ukrainian forces of shelling a brewery in the occupied city of Donetsk, killing one person and triggering a leak of ammonia on Wednesday night. The Emergencies Ministry in the Russian-backed self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic says a shell hit an ammonia line late at night, sparking a fire that at one point covered 600 square meters. Flames were seen lighting the sky above one part of the city, as well as firefighters donning masks. In another clip, a corpse is seen on the ground. Over in the Kharkiv region, Ukraine's National Guard servicemen used anti-craft cannon against Russian troops. One of the servicemen and one of the anti-aircraft guns crew says it was unusual use of the weapon. Ukraine, which has stepped up its drive to retake Russian-controlled regions in the south, said last week it saw evidence Moscow was redeploying its forces to defend the captured territory. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials say Russia is attacking scores of civilian and military targets in its bid to establish full control over Ukraine's Luhansk and Donetsk regions in the east, with 120 rockets hitting the area around the town of Nikopol overnight. Dnipropetrovsk governor Valentin Rezhenko said on Instagram that 3 people were killed and 7 wounded by shelling in Nikopol when 120 grade rockets hit the area. And as President Volodymyr Zelensky says plans are underway for a major counter-offensive to retake the southwestern city of Kherson, Ukrainian officials are encouraging residents living in areas around an imminent huge battle to flee. However, some Ukrainians are reluctant to leave their homes. Many homes in the region have been blighted by Russian shelling. Locals say officials are telling them to leave, as it is risky for residents to live so close to the front line. Finally, satellite images have been released showing damages made to the Russian Seki air base in Crimea. One senior Ukrainian official suggested a series of explosions at the Seki air base in Crimea could have been the work of partisan saboteurs, as Kiev denies any responsibility for the incident deep inside Russian-occupied territory.
Ukraine's Interior Minister Denis Monastyrski says Ukraine had to be ready for any scenario at the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that has been hit by shelling, including evacuating people from the area. Ukraine and Russia installed local officials, blamed each other for a new volley of shelling at the nuclear power plant, Europe's biggest, which lies in southern Ukraine. According to him, the plant is, as of today, not only in the hands of the enemy, but in the hands of uneducated specialists who could potentially allow for a tragedy to happen. Ukraine has in recent days warned of the risk of a Chernobyl-style nuclear disaster. In the meantime, the State Emergency Services, together with the Interior Ministry and the Regions Ministry, is discussing different scenarios that are needed, including the question of evacuations. And coming up after the break, as remains of huge missiles are inspected, Kramatorsk workers says they cannot leave. Please join us again. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Ukrainian police say several cities in Ukrainian-controlled Donbass were hit by Russian strikes. One missile struck the city center of Kramatorsk. That's in Donetsk region, located about 20 kilometers from the closest front line. One resident, Natalia, a witness who heard 2 explosions at 4 a.m., said she still wouldn't leave Kramatorsk because she wanted to continue to work. Ukrainian officials, however, say Russia is attacking scores of civilian and military targets in its bid to establish full control over Ukraine's Luhansk and Donetsk regions in the east. The European Union's embargo on the imports of Russian coal that came into effect on Thursday may worsen the energy and even economic crisis of the bloc. And that's according to an analysis piece released by China's Central Television. The EU decided to embargo Russian coal in April and initially proposed a 90-day transitional period for member states. The period was extended to 120 days at the request of Germany and other countries. The coal embargo on Russia is one of the 5th round of EU sanctions against the country, and is also the first time the EU has imposed sanctions on Russian energy since the Ukraine crisis started. Data shows that 45% of the EU's annual coal imports come from Russia, with a total value of about 4 billion euros. Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands are the largest buyers within the EU. Let's talk to Ini John Mekwa, who joins me at this point. Morning to you, Ini. Let's start off with that last piece of information there, the embargo. We talked about it earlier, I believe this week, and we did talk about the potential impact this could have both on the economies and on the countries within Europe, and even on Russia itself, because as a source of income, right? Now, it's come into effect, and now there are those who are pointing out that it's likely to worsen the energy crisis.
Obviously, because, we've also talked about how some countries, including Germany and even close towards South Africa, have gone back to coal in spite of the deadline and the goal setting and the climate change talks and all of that. So it's supposed to be a minimal source of energy for countries, but, in a dire situation like this one, when everything else is closing up and Russia is also using its weapon, the energy weapon, then people had to turn back to coal. So if now the coal is being embargoed, Russia first is losing about, I think they're losing about $8 billion every year to this, but I guess the countries involved will lose even much more than that. We're talking about health now because of warmth. We've had the threat in UK. I mean, every day we talk to Juliana and I, we talk about energy.
Oh,
yeah, we talk
almost
about
exclusively
energy.
because that seems to be the biggest challenge.
Yes, it is. It is. Energy cost has really skyrocketed. Their GDP is out now and they have dropped again. So you're talking of recession in the UK. And when you look at what's really driving it, inflation, it's energy that is really, really driving it. So, and what happens is the world is really, really connected. So what happens in one country, I mean, who thought that Nigeria would be feeling the impact of the war going on in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, absolutely.
So we're feeling it. So it might seem like, coal is not a major source of energy for a lot of countries, especially the European country, because you have some some of them who are using wind, some of them are using nuclear. But at the end of the day, even if it's 1% that they get from coal, once that is out, and then you have a turning off of the turbine and
Yes.
turning it on and turning it off and everything, you know. And by the way, you remember the one we talked about that was turned off because Ukraine said they couldn't go.
Yes.
They've turned it back on now, but we don't know how long
it will remain
it
turned
will remain
on for.
turned on for. Exactly. So every little thing now affects, even the news that, oh, we're going to meet and there's going to be, when OPEC was going to meet and people were expecting that they're going to increase the quota for countries, it affected the price of oil and trickled down, you know, to, it's very volatile now. So this is obviously affecting a lot of European countries, a lot.
Well, let's look at something else. Turkey, which has been the recipient of a lot of goodwill as a result of the role that it's been playing in this crisis, has a current account deficit problem.
Yes.
How come?
Yeah, so Turkey, I think, well, the president has an idea of his own. So what this means first is that their import-exports, and their imports is now more than their exports, and it's gone up, it's about 200% now. So it's really bad for the country. And when we hear of a lot of countries hiking rates, it's basically to protect their currency, protect their economy. Remember, because the EU refused to hike rates, we had the dollar and the euro at par for the first time in about 20 years because they did not hike their rates. So in Turkey, well, the president has the notion that his focus is on economic growth, so that if the currency is not so high, then it will encourage exports. But the problem with Turkey now is, we know Turkey, here in Nigeria, you hear, oh, it's Turkey, you know, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
But they also are importing energy. And it's costing them a lot because their currency has dropped. It has no value. That means they need more of their currency to buy what they would normally buy, you know, before now. So it's costing the economy a whole lot. And to make it worse, they have drought. So it's affecting their production. They're supposed to have wheat. They're supposed to have, you know, some of those agricultural goods. But the drought is affecting their production. So the essence of not hiking rates is so that your currency or your products will be cheap and encourage exports so that people outside will find it cheaper to buy yours compared, for instance, to the dollar.
Right.
Unfortunately, you don't have that export now because you have droughts. And then now you have high energy costs and you're still importing the wheat that you need because you could not produce it for feeding. So their export has really gone down, and the economy they are not hiking rates, so they cannot favorably compare.
And not for economic reasons, mainly for other reasons, which are bigger picture.
Yes.
Which is what had enabled other countries react.
Exactly. So if they had done what other countries were doing, for instance, fine, their currency would be high and maybe people would not be attracted, and then they will be at least at par with some countries.
Yeah, the deficit would not be so big.
Yes, because their inflation now is about 80%. The inflation is really high. And what people do, or what governments do, is when inflation is that high, then you hike the rate so that it will reduce the amount of money, and then it could, not will,
but in most cases.
Yes. So it will taper down the inflation and at least bring a kind of normalcy. But because he's so determined, as a president, he's so determined to focus on economic growth. So he wants to make it, for instance, lending will be cheap, so people will still go ahead and lend money. But you see, they borrow the money, bring it back into the system, inflation goes up. Unfortunately, the products are not really there for you to export, so the economy is not gaining from what you expected it to gain, so it doesn't stabilize. So I think that's why it's putting Turkey in not very good light at this time. And we don't hear the president thinking of changing his
that
stance.
policy anytime soon. It did. Now, on the other side of this, they've been playing a good role in mediating between Ukraine and Russia.
And they've been gaining from that too.
And they've been, I was going to point that out, that they've been gaining
from that too.
Now, but on the other side, Ukraine has kind of had problems, not unexpected, but now it's their dairy industry.
Yes, yes. So we talk about wheat all the time from Ukraine, but they also have a strong dairy and cattle production industry. Well, we do not expect it, to be flourishing at this time.
Right.
I think there was an example of someone who had 8,000 hectares of land, or acres of land. Now that's 3,200 hectares of farm. And he used to keep 1,300 cows there, basically for dairy products. But now it has about 200. So, I mean, the devastation, the workers, and all of that have left. So this is another area. And that's why we see President Zelensky every time, on the broadcast, asking for aids, and we wonder, I mean, you're getting so much money, what's going on? Because
all these effects are happening.
Yes, they are there, the individuals, the industry, and this is obviously a country that used to depend so much on its production. They didn't depend so much on import. It doesn't look like it. A lot of what they had for their revenue and everything used to come from inside. So apart from wheat, they had things like this. Cattle production was a major one for them, and dairy. They also used to export. I think they exported, in January alone, they exported more than 500,000 tons of milk. That's revenue for some individuals. That's revenue for the economy, and they don't have all of that anymore. So it's also a struggling one for their dairy industry, not just their wheat.
Well, but while they suffer on that hand, there might be some cheery news. McDonald's, which closed in Russia, is opening back in Ukraine.
Yes, and they've been closed in Ukraine for about 6 months since the war, obviously. But they've been gracious enough to be paying about 10,000 employees. They've been paying them
during this period.
During this period, so they've been gracious enough to do that. So they're now saying they want to reopen. Before the war, they had about 109 outlets in Ukraine, but they had,
That's a whole lot of buggers.
No, but they had more than that in Russia. In Russia, they had 850. And they're all gone.
Those
and you remember we talk about Tasty or what? That's the name
that's the name of the new outlet in Russia.
Yeah, I wonder what they're doing now with their chips. Remember we talked about their chips?
They have that potatoes are scarce.
Yes,
what's happening with that? But all those problems are likely to be exacerbated in the case of Ukraine, because the battle is actually going on in Ukraine.
It's going on in Ukraine, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I guess it's just a form of solidarity, to show, okay, let's see. Because according to them, there are some other outlets, eateries that are still functioning, like in Kyiv and some of those places that are a bit peaceful. So they're hoping to cash in on that and, of course, produce employment. So they're already talking to some of their suppliers in the different value chain. But of course, they will, as you mentioned, because one of the things they will need, obviously, will be some of these dairy products.
Absolutely.
Which they would have easily gotten at the backyard.
Next door.
Exactly. So we hope they won't have to start importing, which is going to increase
the cost.
And maybe affect the quality of what
and then, of course, affect the capacity of those who are buying. Because, I mean, a country at war, many of the people themselves
where's
are
the
not...
purchasing power that we're talking about now? So I think it's just a sign of, we're with you, let's encourage you and see how we can help the economy. It's not very convenient, obviously. It's not very convenient. But it's just a way to say, okay, we're with you, Ukraine, and we want to start and see how we can at least open some of those outlets and get the people employed. Even though they've been paying the 10,000 people, let's get them doing something.
That, of course, is unlikely to be sustainable. There will be many people who say you can't keep paying them in perpetuity.
6 months. I think they have done a lot already.
They've done a lot, and there's no indication that the crisis is going anywhere close to ending. So that will be part of the problem. How are the markets doing? You referenced oil prices earlier on.
Yes.
Is there still that nexus between oil prices and the markets? Is that continuing?
Oh, okay. I think the oil. I think the oil now, because we hear that that pipeline we talked about going through Ukraine
that was switched off.
Switched off, and then we saw oil react to it, and then it switched back on. But oil has not gone back to 100 for some days now. I think since the beginning of this week, there's the fear of recession,
which is very real, and which you've just, with the figures out in the UK today,
exactly.
That's official.
That is just out there, and that, of course, is going to affect demand. And its supply, we're not sure of where it's going to come from. So Basically, if not because of the threat of recession, prices are supposed to be skyrocketing now because the cuts from Russia and we're winning ourselves off. We cannot win ourselves. Pipelines switched off.
Or switched on and all that.
Exactly. Yeah, but the threat of recession is becoming real, and that is affecting the movement of oil prices, which is why we see it's hovering around 90, 91. I think it managed to get to 98 sometimes during the week, but it hasn't hit that 100 that it's been dancing on for a couple of weeks.
But generally speaking, the markets seem to have done better this week.
Yes. In fact, Asian markets has been, you know, of course, they shut down because of their zero COVID thing.
Right, yeah.
Since they came back, I think since last week, at least from the beginning of this week, the Asian markets have been up. They've been doing very well. They've been in the green. In the U.S. too, U.S. has been mixture, but Asia has really been doing well. Back here in Africa, we've also had positive. Yesterday, markets were positive. Although Nigeria now closed marginally low, obviously people will take profits. Once the market goes up, people will just sell off and then you see
and exit and wait for it to come down and then come in again.
This cycle is just it. But I think that markets have seen this as it's a reality at this time. For instance, remember when the U.S. came out with their inflation figure?
Right.
It came out just a couple of days ago. It wasn't as high as people thought.
Many people
so
thought
the
it would be.
market was like, we can handle this.
We can price this in.
Exactly.
We can price this into what we're already doing.
And then when there's interest rate hike is not as high as people feared it would be, then we also see markets relaxing and like things are just, stabilizing. We have priced this in. This is our new reality. We can handle this. So except something that, was not expected just comes up, then we see the market sway, and before you know it, it finds its level.
There were people who were worried for the Nigerian market. I know that earlier on, when this crisis started, we had discussed it week after week, and then we had said that the Nigerian market was doing extremely well.
Yes, we're doing extremely well. We're doing extremely well.
And then it seems as if then mixed sentiments came in.
Well, in the case of the Nigerian market, we cannot overemphasize the fact that politics is a major driver of that market now. Investors are very uncertain as to where the country is going or what's going to happen next. So a lot of people are just watching. I mean, the equities market is even good. I think people are easily enter that market.
Right.
So, you see movement. Today the market can be down, tomorrow, and then before you see it, it recovers. The fixed income market is just so quiet.
Yeah, it's dormant. It's almost completely done.
Yes, and I've spoken to analysts from that market, and they don't see anything changing anytime soon because people are just holding on to what they have to say, let's see what direction this is going to take, and then we can know
where to put our money and all of that. I mean, you can see, you're right about what's going on in Asia. It does look as if they've priced in a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of people were worried when there was the COVID thing and then this war in Ukraine and its effect on energy supplies. They are also quite dependent on energy supplies, by the way.
Yes.
But they seem to have priced that in. And each day we talk about China getting discounted oil, India getting discounted oil. This is the result.
Yes, this is the results. They've come to like a level of being stable, at least for now, and they don't see anything disrupting it. So there's production. They're very high in ICT,
That's it, production and services.
Exactly. So once they have that aspect active, then we see that everything is almost like stable and they are ready to take on whatever comes. At least we know about Russia, we know how to handle it. We're dealing with the oil, our energy is stable. We're not like Germany and all of that,
And we are more in control of our destiny, shall we say.
Something like that. And they are hard also. Asian people are really hard.
They're quite hard, very productive.
Yes.
Very foresighted. They know exactly where it is they want to go and how to get there.
And determined
to do so.
To get there without being distracted.
Perhaps some lessons in there for us.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the perspective this morning. Of course, there'll be more of that and indeed the other business stories as they emerge, not just about the war in Ukraine, but globally. Ini and Laddie Williams will be around to unpack that. Right after this, on Business Morning, the last day of the working week. So you know what to take into the weekend and then later on Business Incorporated. Thank you, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, Chicago teens break Guinness World Record while raising money for Ukraine. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Kosovo is prepared to stand against a possible attack by Serbia as worsening strife with minority Serbs could result in a new armed conflict. And that's according to Prime Minister Albin Kurti. Mr. Kurti also accuses Russia, which is Serbia's main ally and has vetoed Kosovo's bid for United Nations membership, of a role in stirring up fresh ethnic tensions in the former southern province of Serbia. Tensions between Serbia and Kosovo flared again earlier this month when Pristina said it would oblige Serbs living in the north who are backed by Belgrade and do not recognize Kosovo's institutions to start using vehicle license plates issued in Pristina. The situation calmed after Mr. Kurti, under US and European Union pressure, agreed to postpone the number plates rule until September the 1st, and NATO peacekeepers supervised the removal of roadblocks set up by the Serbs.
I am a responsible Prime Minister and I have to tell the truth to the people. I'm not saying that they're going to attack us this week or next, but it would be totally irresponsible to exclude, with all this aggressive politics of Belgrade, possibility of rising tensions and new conflicts. It is possible. So this is problematic. Having an autocracy as our northern neighbor is problematic for us. We are vigilant. We're following it closely. We have NATO in Kosovo. We have EU in Kosovo, even though we're not members there. But we're not afraid. So we're vigilant, but not afraid. We should not exclude. We should not exclude this aggressive policies of Belgrade to turn also into assault against Kosovo in one way or the other. We have our institutions and organs of security and defense, and Kosovo is a state now. This is not the year 1998. This is the year 2022. So we are much more prepared to defend our sovereignty, territorial integrity, to defend our democracy, to defend the rule of law, constitutionality, and to defend our progress.
To the United Kingdom, where Conservative leadership contender Rishi Sunak vows that as Prime Minister he would continue Britain's support to strengthen Ukraine and weaken Russia and would impose further sanctions. Mr. Sunak is competing against Liz Truss to become the next British Prime Minister and replace outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who has been a strong supporter of Ukraine amidst Russia's invasion.
Those numbers are worse. We'll continue with that policy, continuing strengthening Ukraine and continuing to weaken Russia. I did that as Chancellor. I put in place a set of economic sanctions together with my colleagues from around the world that are tightening the grip on Putin's war machine, and I would want to do more of that as Prime Minister. And actually, when it comes to energy, one of the things I was working on as Chancellor was a different way of doing the sanctions on Russia to see if we could find a way to do it, which would actually mean that we don't have such high energy bills and could cut off the supply of money to them. And I'd like to find a way to make that work as PM.
In the sports, Russian ice hockey goaltender Ivan Fedotov has been informed that his preliminary court hearing is scheduled for September the 20th. For case preparation and a ruling on the appointment of a hearing, his lawyer Alexei Ponomarev was told he will have 40 days before proceedings continue. Fedotov is in northwestern Russia for mandatory military service, but has filed a complaint against this through legal routes. He was recruited for military service in Ukraine and was arrested in St. Petersburg on suspicion of dodging the draft. The European Championship Management has confirmed that all 9 sports at the Munich 2022 competition, which will be televised free in Ukraine as a gesture of solidarity. The regional channels in Ukraine will feature at least 75 hours of television broadcasting and 175 hours of live streaming showcasing each of the 9 sports making up the second multi-event European Championships. Coverage of athletics, beach volleyball, canoe sprint, cycling, gymnastics, rowing, sports climbing, triathlon and table tennis will run in Ukraine from August the 13th to the 21st.
You're right to straighten that one out.
You're watching the full display of the power of teenagers armed with corn pops and Rice Krispies in Chicago. Using 5,000 boxes of cereal gifted by Kellogg's, members of a group created a Guinness World Record-breaking cereal mosaic with proceeds going to help non-profit Resume for Ukraine. With the corn pops yellow boxes and the Rice Krispies blue ones, the teens made a massive Ukrainian flag on the floor of the Wintrust Financial Corporation's Grand Banking Hall in downtown Chicago. The teams aren't just providing financial support for Ukraine, but also for their local community as well. So far, 70 donors have given just under $15,000 to the Chicago Children's United for Ukraine's Cereal Mosaic fundraiser to help Ukraine.
We wanted to raise awareness for Ukraine, and so we decided to go break a record with a good cause behind it. You're looking at the Ukrainian flag made out of approximately 5,000 cereal boxes, and the previous record was 4,000, so we broke it by a big amount. It's just great because we're helping globally and locally, so it's just great all around that we're helping.
The corn pops represent the fields for the bottom of the flag, and the Rice Krispies represent the sky for the Ukraine flag. We came up with this idea because originally Michael and I, every time we came down or stuff like that, we always ate cereal, and we love cereal so much. So we decided, we were like, oh, let's use cereal as the perfect food to create the mosaic, the cereal box mosaic. And when we decided that, we were like, oh, what are we gonna do with the cereal boxes when we're done with it? And we were like, oh, we should donate it to a charity or something like that. So we decided to donate it to the Greater Chicago Food Depository.
Creative work. Artists from Ukraine and the United States are transforming a heap of burnt-out cars destroyed in the early days of Russia's war in Ukraine with brilliant sunflowers. The project has drawn some fire from those who say it is wrong to create beauty out of the wreckage of war, but the artists themselves insist their work has been sanctioned by city leaders and will help Ukrainian artists and overall rebuilding efforts. Muralist Trek Kelly from Los Angeles said the response had been overwhelmingly positive, including from one couple whose car was in the pile, who thanked them for repurposing these cars into something more beautiful. Authorities had also assured the artists that no human lives were lost in those cars, most of which were moved from a nearby bridge destroyed by Ukrainian forces to halt the advance of Russian tanks shortly after the February 24 invasion. The collective will sell their work as digital assets to raise money for local causes.
The project is about raising money for Ukrainian artists and collaborating with them and cooperating with cities who will designate for us the appropriate walls that they wish to be beautified, some in very damaged areas, specifically because they want to beautify those areas for people's spirits until they can rebuild. And then we're making NFTs out of the murals so that they can be sold to help fund local humanitarian.
Good help for those very much in need. That's where we wrap up the program this morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ladi Akeredoluale. It's back on Monday morning, but there'll be an update later on in the day at 5 o'clock on The World Today. For now, to have yourselves a pleasant weekend ahead. Good morning.